Shalom, everyone. Lila Tov. It's good to see you tonight. Um, we are in Daniel, thanks to the auspices of Rod Bryant and Nativ. And hopefully, you will look to subscribe or become a part of the family if you're not, and help us to grow. Um, I was speaking, we were in Daniel. This is the book that I've used for years. And I use the word years because it was created in 1979. It was the very first Art Scroll book that ever came out. And so back then, I was already searching for Jewish sources of uh, writings and commentaries. And so this one was the first one. And so far, I've taught it 4 different times. This is the fifth time through, actually. I went back and counted. This is my fifth time through. And I will tell you, since this was written in 1979, a whole lot of things have changed in my mind, and you're going to hear some of them tonight. In fact, I want to leave you with some questions as we go through tonight that you can look at, because next week it will be part 2 of this section. This is Daniel chapter 8, part 1. And it's the traditional reading of the Daniel that was written by the Rashis and the Sede Gilons and the Rambams and all of them. So that's the source that I originally used. Tonight, I'm going to tell you that I've used lots of sources. I continually go to the web now that the web is here, and I'm constantly looking for sources. And so I find bits and pieces and I add them to it. One of the sources that I'm using is the Book of Enoch. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is a apocrypha book. It was written about 200 or 300 BC. Now, Daniel was written about 600 BC, so this is 300 years later. But when this book is finally published, or when this scroll was finally published, there was a great deal of searching for understandings, what was going on. Israel was in trouble. They were under the Greeks. They were tormented to no end, and all through history, we find the time that the Jews reach this point where they really are looking to find out when the Messiah is coming. Well, Enoch was published. Enoch is written in the obviously long after Enoch had lived on this earth, because the Enoch they're talking about is the Enoch that was the father of Methuselah. So a lot of our story comes from the book of Genesis. But I want you to understand, a lot of it comes. If you read your Christian Bible, you've read much of the book of Enoch, because you see, the book of Enoch is quoted constantly in the New Testament. It's even quoted in the Old Testament, if you want to call the Tanakh an Old Testament. There, Enoch's first section is called the Watchers, and the Watchers talks about angels. I don't mean to get too far into this, but I wanted you to understand he deals a lot with angels. He deals a lot with the Messiah. In fact, what got him banned from the Jewish understanding is the fact that he believed he knew when the Messiah would be born and where he would be born. And so that was heretical. So therefore, it never made it into the scriptures. And that was back in the 3rd century AD. So there was a lot of things going on, but it dealt with the angels that were copulating with the women on this planet, creating Nephilim, the giants. There were also stories in here about the fact that Enoch actually was a messenger from God. He was sent to the angels, talking to them and explaining to them what was going to happen, and that they would be punished and what it would look like. And so all of that is in the book of Enoch. So it's several sections. First Enoch is dealing with the Watchers. Second, third, fourth deals with periods later on. And in that, I've grabbed some of the information that's there. And I stuck it in my mind just to hang on to it, because you never know when you're going to need trivia questions. But as I'm going through the lesson, I want you to understand Well, let's go first to the last verse of Daniel chapter 8. So would you look in there? And we're at the last verse, verse number 26. Okay. Verse 26 begins, the vision of the nightfall and the morning. And it's written Arev Boker. In other words, there's no in between. It goes from nightfall to morning quickly, which has been spoken is true. As for you, obscure the vision. So what we're about to read tonight is an obscured vision. In other words, it was never meant to be clear. Clarity would come as time passed. That was the understanding. Clarity would come as the time passed because it didn't belong for those days. It belonged long days after. So we have to understand that what we're reading was not made clear to Daniel, although Daniel knew it, but Daniel wasn't allowed to share it, just like he didn't share all of what he saw in Daniel chapter 7, just as he won't share all that he knows in chapter 12. Much of the text that we're going to be reading is text that was put together or understood in commentaries by the Rashi, by Rambam, by the Saint Agion, by a lot of characters who lived in the 9th, 10th, 12th century. That's where the Daniel that I was reading came from. But you and I both know that it didn't end when they thought it would. Well, actually, some of you know because I sent you a copy of the years that Rashi had figured out, and we'll go through that as we get there. But understand that what we're reading is not totally clear, and that's why I'm going to give you some questions to think about. Because I hope you're pondering what's going on. I hope that there are things in here that are more than curiosities to you. There are things that you would like to know. And maybe you can help me understand exactly what we're talking about. Okay, let's go back to the first verse in this whole story. So in chapter 8, verse 1, it begins by saying, in the third year of Belshazzar's reign. Now, the third year of his reign is his last year. Now, the last year was under a great deal of stress because the Persians and the Medias were actually on the doorstep. And remember, the story of Belshazzar's end came because he thought he had already beat the two nations back, when in actuality they just appeared to disappear, and they dammed up the river and came under the river into the city. So this is the third year that this is happening. Now Daniel gets this vision, and notice it's a vision that he's actually seeing. It appears to me, I, Daniel, after that which had appeared to me at first. So something appeared to him at first. So he doesn't tell us what that is. First question, what is he talking about? He goes on to say in our story, verse 2, I saw in the vision when I saw I was in Shushan, the capital, which is in the province of Elam. Problem. Shushan wasn't a city then. Shushan was a fortress. In fact, it wasn't even going to be the capital city of the Persian Empire until the days of Esther and Ahasuerus. Up until then, the Persepolis was actually the capital of the Persian Empire. So Darius the Mede made the capital the city of Babylon. When he was on his untimely death, Cyrus the Persian took the capital back to Iran, or Persepolis, and that's where the capital was. Shushan will become important to Daniel because Shushan, that will be where he will die. You see, he is in Shushan serving Esther. He is one of her courtiers at that point in time. He'll be killed by Haman trying to deliver a message to Mordecai. Now, if you go to Persia, you will find, or you go to Iran, you will find the grave of Daniel there, the cave in which he's buried. So we know Daniel died there, only his name on the stone will be Hatat. Hatat. You see, he was given a new name by the Persians. So he is no longer Belshazzar, he was now Hatat, but he still went by the name of Daniel. So Shushan is the city where he is going to eventually be and where he will eventually die. But in the course of time, the thing that's important is the fact that it wasn't the capital city at that particular point in time. It would be another 40 years before it would become the capital city. And the reason it became the capital city is because Ahasuerus had a throne made for him out of glass and gold. And this chair was so fragile that he built his palace around it. And the fortress was then extended around the palace. So that's where he will end up. But that's the story that we're starting with. In verse 2, it goes on to say, I saw in the vision that I was at the Eloi stream. Now, the Saadia Gaon from Egypt, he said there was no such thing as a river called Eloi. He simply said it was a stream, but it may not have been a stream at all. It may have been just simply a highway. But we understand from Jewish sources that if the prophet receives his message at the temple or in the temple area, if you're outside the country like Ezekiel was, he received it by a river, a place of clean water. And so the Jewish nation identifies the Eloi as a river that was flowing in the country of Persia at that particular point in time. Now he raised his eyes and he looked, and behold, a ram is standing before the stream. And then it goes on to say, and it has horns. The horns are high, but one is higher than the other. And the higher one is coming up last. Now I saw the ram goring westward, northward, southward, and no beast could stand before it, nor could anyone rescue from its hand. It did as it pleased, and it grew. Now, later on in verse 20, we're going to find out that he's talking about Persia. The character that he's really talking about is the character called Darius the Persian, because you see, Darius the Persian will be the one who will find himself regrettably facing off with Alexander the Great. And Darius, who was Esther's son, had moved the empire, had caused it to grow. But he only caused it to grow in 3 directions as you look at this whole story. But it gives us some specifics that we need to understand. So it's by a stream or by a river. One of the things that I might also add is the word for ram, because I'm going to ask you another simple question. In Daniel chapter 7, we saw Persia as being a bear. We saw Greece as being a leopard. So why does he change animals? Why do we now have a ram, and why do we now have a goat, a he-goat? What caused him to change? That's a question that I've asked myself all the way through every time I've studied this. I think I have an answer this time, but I'm not going to share it till next week because I want you to think about it. I want you to ponder this whole idea. But anyway, so he moves against the Greeks. In fact, he gets all the way into the Macedonian area. And I don't know if you remember the Peloponnesian Wars, if you remember Thermopylae, where the 300 Spartans stood against the Persian army. That whole idea of causing the Greeks to gather together. Eventually, the Greeks under Philip of Macedonia created an army and marched out against Persia, crossing that same Dardanelles, that same straits, and moved back and started to push against the Persians. Philip died. Alexander the Great took over. And we know what happened with Alexander the Great, how he moved across the country. Well, the story goes on. If I'm looking at verse 5, it says, I was contemplating this, and behold, a he-goat comes from the west across the surface of the entire earth, but not touching the ground. And the he-goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. Well, it came up to the two-horned ram that it had been seen standing by the stream, and it ran at it with a fury as of its might. Now, again, horns represent power. Excuse me, represent power. So we're talking about two powerful groups. The ram had two horns because it represented Media-Persia Empire. Media was the smaller of the horn. Persia was the larger of the horn. Greece, on the other hand, it was a single horn between the eyes. We understand that Greece really only goes as far as Alexander can go. With Alexander's death, and he will die from a fever that he develops, which cuts short everything that he's planned and whatever he was about to do. So Alexander dies, and he'll be replaced. But in our story right now, he's charging across, and it says from the end of the earth. We can't take the end of the earth by saying it was all the way from the United States all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. We can't even go from the coast of Spain. Our distance is really from Macedonia, from Greece. But if we look back at the historical period, there wasn't such a thing as nations that were farther west at that point in time. So this is about something that's going to happen very close. And so he moves across the land very quickly. He hops and skips, according to the real literal of the Hebrew. And so the ram had no strength to stand before it. The goat threw it to the ground and he trampled it. Darius the Persian will die, but he won't die because Alexander runs a sword through him. He is going to die because the satraps that were under him, or the generals that were under him, capture him and kill him and deliver his dead body to Alexander, saying, we quit, you win. And so he captures all the land that the Persians had owned all the way through. And that's when he had gone all the way to the Indus River. Now, he didn't cross the Indus River because there was something on the other side that scared him to death. In fact, he tried twice, but he never succeeded, and that was the elephants. You see, the Indian people were using elephants like tanks against the horses. And so Alexander couldn't go any farther. So he went back to Babylon, where he set up his kingdom there. But before he goes back to Babylon, he takes 80,000 of his men and tells them to marry Persian women. Well, why does he want them to marry Persian women? Because he wants to create an army of Greek Persians, because they would be the stronger fighters. He's creating a hybrid, a super race, if you will. And that's what he was about to do, except for the fact that he ends up dying of a fever at the age of 33. And so the plan falls apart. And as we read on, it says, then the he-goat grew greatly. And this is verse 8. At its mightiest, the great horn was broken at the age of 33. And the semblance of four horns came up in its place. Now, remember, when we were looking at in Daniel 7, it was a leopard and it had four heads on the leopard. So we're getting the same concept here, or the same idea, or apparently the same idea. It says, but it was pointing towards the four directions of the heavens. Again, he's back in Babylon. Now, if he's in Babylon, then that means that there was land north of him that belonged to Alexander. There was land south, east, and west. So technically, these generals will divide up the land and create 4 different smaller kingdoms in different areas. We're most familiar with the Seleucid because that's the area with Antiochus Epiphanes, who's came against the Jews and created what we call Hanukkah. Then we also recognize Egypt because that's the Ptolemies, and we see them in our stories as we go through this understandings. So those 2 are the ones that are most common. One is the furthest out into Persia. He immediately is destroyed by the Seleucid, and the other one was in Macedonia, which was there for quite a while. But anyway, as our story goes on, he says, out of one of them came forth one little horn, which grew exceedingly southward and eastward and toward the coveted land. So one of the horns is now going to eventually, another horn, a little horn, will come out of it. Now, as the Art Scroll says, as the Art Scroll believes, Rashi and the rest of them say what we're talking about is a character called Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, the Jews had a different name for him. Epiphanes is to be a great soul. They chose to refer to him as a piece of toilet. But anyway, that's beside the point. And the words are very similar, but I'm not going to go there. So anyway, he goes towards 2 directions and towards the Holy Land. He goes towards, first off, southward, because he finds himself in confrontations constantly with the people to the south. He goes to the east because he conquers the Persian king and takes over his land. But the coveted land is the land in between. And it's the land where more wars have been fought by all of the major powers of the Middle East. That's where most wars go to. Well, we now come to my first question, or my second question, because my first question is, why do we change animals? My second question is this. Look at verse 9. Out of one of them came forth this little horn, which grew exceedingly southward, eastward, and to the west coveted land. It grew up how high? It grew up to the hosts of heaven. Time out. Were we talking about Antiochus or are we talking about Superman? Who are we talking about? Okay. Now, that's the first time I've ever asked anybody this question, but I choose to ask you now because you're Bible students and you all are interested in what's going on. So he grew up to the hosts of heaven. And it goes on to say, and it threw some of the host and some of the stars to the ground, and he trampled them. Hello. Who did he trample? Did he trample angels? Or are we talking about simply righteous men, priests, if you will? Who's he talking about? He goes on to say after that, it exalted itself even to whom? The master of the host. Now, the word for the master of the host is Zahav. Zahav, Sar Zahav. That character is the heavenly chief. That's what it means. Time out. It exalted itself even up to the exalted chief of staff in God's heaven. Are we talking about a spiritual experience here, or are we talking about a physical experience? What kind of thing are we talking about? Well, I'm not done yet, because it goes on to say, because of it, the daily offerings was removed, and the foundations of his sanctuary. Notice the word his sanctuary was thrown down. Okay, time out. Are we talking then about Antiochus shutting off the sanctuary? Now, if we are, then when we go down to verse number 26, now remember, this is the verse we started with. The vision of the nightfall and of the morning, which has been spoken, is true. As for you, obscure the visions that belong to when? Question. What sanctuary is he talking about? Now, Rashi says that we're not talking about Antiochus. We're talking about Titus and his destruction of the second temple. Okay. I want you to hang on to that for a while, because we're going to find out when Rashi said this was all going to happen, when the end would actually be. Because you see, the second temple ended in the 1st century. Rashi's writing from the 9th to the 12th century. That's when all of these scholars are actually writing this commentary that I've been reading for years. But there is no sanctuary now. Is there going to be another sanctuary prior to the sanctuary that they say that is coming from heaven, or that the Messiah is going to build? Are they talking about that one? And if they're talking about that one, time out. That hadn't happened yet. Now look what goes on after that. So he's going to do what? He's going to remove the foundation of his sanctuary was thrown down. Now my Bible has the word his capitalized. Are there capital letters in the Hebrew Bible? No. So it could be a small his, but if it's a large his, then it's talking about God's sanctuary. Does God have a sanctuary right now? Yes, he does. There is a sanctuary in heaven. The one here on earth is not functioning, but the one in heaven is. But for some apparent reason, it's going to quit, and it's going to be thrown down, or at least part of it is. Are you seeing my problem with this book of Daniel? And I don't mean to call it a problem, because what it's trying to do is it's leading me towards understanding the very last days. That's where it's leading me, because that's what Daniel is writing about, is the very last days. That's where we're at. Well, look what it says after that. It will throw truth, Torah, to the ground, and it will achieve and prosper. So there's going to be a period of time when all of this happens. Now, if you're reading the book of Enoch, or if you're reading some of the writings from Chabad, you know that the character they're talking about is called Armilus, Armilus, Armilus. You can take some time to look it up. If you're looking for it in a Christian Bible, he's called Antichrist. He's also referred to as Gog by some of the writers. So the character that we're talking about and the time that we're talking about is the time of the end, and it's about the time of Gog and Magog. That's what this time is all about. But imagine, this vision is clouded. It has truth to it. It's happened before. It happened during the time of Antiochus. It happened during the time of Titus. And it's going to happen again. In Jewish prophecy, oftentimes a prophecy is laid on top of another prophecy. In other words, once done doesn't mean it's done. There's what they call a quantum leap. Quantum. That's a new scientific term for most of us, but it's a term that's been around for hundreds of years. But we've adopted it and changed what it's really meaning. But it goes back to the idea that this is a quantum leap into the future. That's what Daniel 8 is talking about, is something far in the future. Now look at it again from verse number 13. I heard the Holy One speaking. Now we're never going to see this Holy One. We just heard him. That's all we're going to do. Now, some people will say that this is Michael. Other people are going to tell us, no, it's not Michael. It's the Metatron. Metatron was the chief angel. He was the head of all angels. And he's the one that's explaining this. Some say Metatron and Michael are the same character. Whatever you want to use, this angel is not going to be seen. But it says, and the Holy One said to the anonymous one who was speaking, so there's an angel talking to an angel. Until when this vision concerning the daily offerings and the mute abomination, allowing the trampling of the Holy One and the hosts, when will this happen? When will it happen? So that's the next question. When's it going to happen? If you're buying into my question and my theory, then you're going to have to say that this is yet future. That's if you're buying into what I'm saying. Or you can follow the ancients, but I think they're going to leave you a couple years short. Now, let me stop here for a second, and I want to go through Rashi's understanding of time and when all of this was going to happen. He began to measure time, and he went back to, if you go back to the verse number 14, he says, till nightfall and morning, 2,300 what? I'm assuming days, which we could say would be years. So Rashi went back and he began to look at time, and he looked at time beginning with Jacob's arrival in Egypt and the time that they sojourned in Egypt. Now, they sojourned for 210 years, so that was the first number he used. The second number he used was from the time of the Exodus until the building of the first temple. That was 480 years. Then he said the life of that first temple, that's 410 years. And then he said the Babylonian captivity, the destruction of the first temple, the Babylonian captivity, that's 70 years. He went to the temple too until the removal of the daily sacrifices, and that was 414 years. Now, from the removal of the daily sacrifices, according to the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 11, that would be 1,290 years. So Rashi added all of those up. He came to the number 2874. That's the number of years total so far. Then he went back to this verse with 2,300. Added that to the number, it came out to 4,999. Rashi was expecting the Mashiach to arrive at the year 4,999 from the beginning of time. That's when he was expecting him to come. We are now in 5,700 years, right? So Rashi, when he picked 4,999, he was picking a time that was far ahead of when he lived, because 1499 was actually the year 1602. 1602. So I went and I looked in my guides of what happened in what year, and 1602, nothing happened. There's no Jewish event that was ever recorded that was of any interest or significance. So, not to say that Rashi was wrong or anybody else, but as we go through time and as we go through this, we all have to understand nobody will pick the actual date. I don't care how many pools you've got going and you get in all of them, nobody will know the day and the hour in which it happens. But we will know that we're getting closer. And I think you and I, after watching what's going on in Israel and the Middle East, are thinking we're coming closer. I look to YouTube all the time, and I've seen so many messages from Christian ministers talking about the fact that we're at the end of days using the book of Revelations. I don't use the book of Revelations anymore, but I do use the book of Daniel, and I agree with them. And I use the book of Ezekiel, and I really agree with him. And so as we're looking at this, I want you to understand, I'm not going to give you a date. That's not anything I can possibly even come up close to. Okay. Having said that, go on to verse 15. When I, Daniel, saw the vision, I sought understanding. And then behold, there stood before me the likeness of a man. Now I use the word likeness of a man because there's a group of angels called Ishbaim. They are like men. So he was probably looking at an angel that was standing over the waters. And I heard a human voice in the middle of the Ulai, not from that man, but a voice. Now, if you ever read the books of Enoch, you're going to find out that there are oftentimes in there are voices that are going to be heard, but no being anywhere around. I think that's the character that Enoch was picking on when he began to write his book. Now, he wrote his book in the second, third century CE. But as we're going through, obviously that's not going to help now. It was before the canon, by the way. In fact, the book of Enoch was lost. I don't know if I remember telling you that or not, but the book of Enoch was lost because the Jews said it was unusable because of the fact of where they said the Messiah would be born and when he would be born and all of that other. The Christians took it out because the fact that it didn't match up with Jesus. So both groups dropped it from their Bibles. There was one copy left, and that was in Ethiopia. You see, the Ethiopian Bible includes the book of Enoch. And so the book of Enoch was saved from that. And we have parchments or partial parchments in the Dead Sea Scrolls that also come from the book of Enoch. So we know the book of Enoch is accurate because the Dead Sea Scrolls are literally right on when they cover Isaiah, when they cover all of the Old Testament stories and the prophets. So we have to assume that they can copy correctly the book of Enoch too. So let's go from there. So anyway, as he goes on, he says, I heard a human voice in the middle of the Ulai, and he called out and said, Gabriel. So Gabriel is the Ishim. Explain the vision to that man. Now, again, it goes on to say, so he came to where I was standing. And when he came, I was terrified, and I fell on my face down. And he said to me, understand. And he called me the Son of Man. Now, the Son of Man, Ben Adam, is the highest expression for a human that is given in the scriptures. There's only one other character that was called Ben Adam. That was the character called Ezekiel. Ezekiel and Daniel are living in the same time. So I'm assuming many of the messages that Ezekiel was receiving came from the same source, from the same character. It goes on to say that the vision concerns when? What does it say? The end of time. So I'm given a choice to say this book is accurate, but it doesn't go far enough. And that's where I want to leave it at this point. Now, this is my fifth time through, and this is the first time I've said I'm not trusting this for the total end. In fact, I'm using my sanctified imagination, everything that I've read and found from all kinds of sources, and I'm trying to put together my best understanding of what's going on. So you may agree or you may disagree, but it's the best information I can find. If you can find more, I'd appreciate it. So, but anyway, as we go on, here it is. So it concerns the time of the end. Verse 18. And as he spoke to me, I fell into a deep sleep. with my face to the ground. But he touched me and I stood me to up in my place. Verse 19. He said, I am ready to inform you what will be after the fury. Now, I assume the fury is the battle of Gog and Magog. That's what I'm assuming it is. Fury here gives, in the Jewish understanding, is a disaster. It's catastrophic. So after this, for at that appointed time will be the end. Again, another point to the fact that we're talking about that Daniel's talking about the end. So another point where we're going to have to say that the end was not with Titus. The end was not with Antiochus. The end is yet future. The two-horned ram that you saw symbolizes the kings of Media and Persia, and the he-goat is the kingdom of Greece. And the large horn that is between the eyes, it's the first king. Well, that would be Alexander the Great. And as for the broken one, in whose place 4 rose, 4 kingdoms will arise from one nation, but lacking its strength, and which is true. This last section is key to where we're going. At the end of their kingdom, when the sinners are annihilated, at the end of their kingdom, the sinners are going to be annihilated. What are we talking about? That's the day of judgment. So now we're definitely in talking about the last days, the end of days, Ketz. A brazen-faced king, some would call it Titus, some would call it Antiochus, others would call it Armilus or Gog. An understander of mysteries, key, an understander of mysteries. One who understands mysteries is a mystic, a Kabbalist, one who studies that which is not easily found. So our character is going to be a mystical character. Now he will arise, his power will grow, but not through his own power. And he will destroy mightily. He will succeed and accomplish and will destroy mighty ones in the nation of holy ones. What's the difference between the mighty ones and the holy ones? Are you finding any questions in here that you hadn't seen before? Now, he goes on to say, because of his cunning and because he will proceed with deceit in his hand, he will grow proud in his heart. He will destroy many in peace, but he will stand up against the master of masters, and he will be broken. Who's the master of masters? God, isn't it? Or the Mashiach. But the question then becomes, which one? That's for another lesson. 26, I've read to you twice already. The vision of nightfall. Okay, I've only been talking for 42 minutes. Excuse my voice. Anybody have any questions about next week's assignment? Next week's assignment is you're going to be able to explain to me Daniel chapter 8. Why do we have 2 different names for our animals? And why does he pick on those two nations? Why is he picking on Greece and why is he picking on Persia? What are they telling us? What are they hinting at? Is it simply about the nation called Greece? Is it simply about the nation called Iran? Or is it about something else all entirely? Okay, I'm done. Anybody have any thoughts?
What is your thought on Rashi's commentary that says that verse 24 is actually, verse 23 is actually speaking that this is Titus, the brazen faced one. What do you think? how can it not be, or what's your view since you have done a lot of research on this?
The word for brazen one is the word for arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other arrogant people that's ever lived on this earth? Like 1938 to
Oh,
1945?
that's true. And who currently resides in Gaza?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Or Iran. See,
Iran. Yeah.
there's lots of arrogant ones. And Rashi picked on I believe Rashi picked on those two simply because of the fact that he believed that it would end soon. He didn't picture it going 6,000 years. 499 is the end. We're supposedly in the 5,000s, supposed to be going into the Messianic era. So therefore, he ended at about the right time if you use the number 499. So that's the idea. But the character with the brazen face, he was a king, is a leader, but he's not leading by being a military genius at this point in time. What we're saying, he's leading because he does what? He has the power to succeed because why? It's his mouth. He has the ability to deceive everyone. Now we're going to find this character again in Daniel chapter 11, or we're going to find somebody in chapter 11.
So you're saying this is potentially not a single character, but a people group or a system.
Correct. With a leader at the end.
Yeah, of course.
So in other words, if you want to call it the Illuminati, who are trying to new world order, rearrange everything so that we now become one world again, go back to the days of Babel. But again, in order for that to happen, somebody's going to have a silver tongue in order to convince China that they don't really want to be the number one nation in the world, or Iran, who's dealing with the Islam versus Christianity. We're looking for a character that's going to come out of something, but he's not necessarily going to be what we would normally think of, because the nations will believe him. So he's going to be somebody. If you were watching television today, you know that the House finally elected somebody to be the Speaker of the House. Now, if you go back and ask people about him, and now his name doesn't come to my head. He's from Louisiana, and it's his third term as a congressman, very eloquent speaker, um, Bible believer. Can't think of his name. But anyway, he was on nobody's list to be the Speaker of the House, and yet he becomes the Speaker of the House. In other words, he was not anybody's first choice, but yet he becomes. The same thing is going to happen with Armillus. Armillus will rise up from the group, according to the book of Enoch. He will not be somebody that they would recognize, but he will eventually have usurped the power of everybody. He will become what we would call Antichrist. He will become that character, the anti-Messiah, if you will. Mike Johnson. Thank you very much, Ross. Mike Johnson. Couldn't think of his name to save my soul. But I would know, and I have to save my soul by remembering his name. But anyway, Louisiana. I unplugged myself so that my wife can hear the conversations that you're all waiting to thrill me with. Lori, go for it.
Well, I decided since you have posed so many questions and I have zero answers for most of those things, that I think I might be absent next week. Just so you know.
So you're saying I should put out a test question for you? Is that
No,
what you're
what she's saying is you should tell her what the answer is now.
Oh.
No, I'm going to let Bobby and Mike answer all your questions while I just listen in.
So why is Mike smirking?
Well, I think she's very honest. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm on my iPhone. So what you're saying, I mean, the commentators saw the Romans in this, they saw Antiochus in this, they saw the Roman Catholic Church in this, they saw the Arabs in this. And what you're saying is you see what's happening today in this. Okay. That's
Yep.
You can get on a bit of thin ice there. We all came from a background where people predicted all kinds of things for all kinds of times. And so I'm curious, how are you going to?
Yeah, well, I'm
to believe this.
I realize, Mike, I realize he's weaving a web here. Okay. And I realize he's leaving a lot of questions to cause us to ponder whether he's going to pontificate over into some wild, harebrained idea like Christians come up with. And he wants us to ponder that for a few days. I've got Steve figured out. He wants us to ponder this for a few days. And some of us may figure it out. But then when he brings it around, you're going to go, oh, okay. 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 Now I get it. Now it's confirmed within the text, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. Well, so now he just wants us to go to bed, scratching our heads, wondering if Steve is going to turn into a postmodern Christian, what do you call it, a prophecy guy, or he's going to quote the Torah. And I believe he will do the latter. So,
yeah, this is not going to be a Christian sermon. This is going to hopefully come from what I'm understanding. I'm not probably going to do much. Lori's asking if I'll do gematria. I don't think I can from the text at this point in time. I am not that proficient at it, but I can tell you that. Let me give you this hint. Greece and Iran, Persia, are only substitute names. In other words, look at modern times. Who can I put in those two slots that would basically fulfill much of what's there? And I'm going to use, again, some of the things that I've read and some of the things that I've learned. For example, in the Talmud, it talks about that the temple will not be built until the wall is knocked down 3 times. What wall are they talking about? Well, the rabbi said that the 3 times is the first time the walls were knocked down by the Babylonians. And the second time they were knocked down by the Romans. When were they knocked down the 3rd time? They haven't been. But where's the wall then? Well, the wall is going to be knocked down by the Edomites. Lo and behold, there's a nation that has red walls. Edom is red. That is where the Catholic Church moved to after Rome. Where is that place? And the Catholic religion no longer exists there. It's an orthodoxy that's there. Where is that? Moscow. Moscow. Is that trivia you haven't heard before? Is that like, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Lou, for explaining it to them. Okay, Ross, your turn.
Well, now I don't have anything else to think about. Okay, Ross.
Well, then you got all the answers.
Night. I was going to stay up all night and wrestle with this, but never mind. Ross, go ahead. Your audio is horribly low.
Could it be because your headphones are behind your head? Oh, you don't have a mic on your headphones.
Boom, boom. How's that?
Now you do.
Better?
Yes, it is. I can hear you.
Okay.
So can Mary
Awesome.
Lou. She's nodding her head. So two of us can hear you anyway. The
right.
rest of them, they may not know what's going on, but that's okay.
Okay. Moscow, Red Square, right?
Correct.
I'm going to try to be really brief. One thing that I've heard you say over and over, and I think it's a problem with a lot of people, that when you say it a certain way, end of time, that's a mental picture. But if you read the wording, it is time of the end, which means you're going to witness the end of something, which will be the beginning of something else. I wrestled with that for a while and tried to keep that straight. The time of the end. We're looking for something to come to a conclusion. And he kind of gives you,
Ross, when you said that, it rung a bell because I feel the same way. And that's only because of the residual psychological effect of hearing that over and over ad nauseum from Christians. I kind of go, I don't believe that it is the end of time. It is the beginning of a new era. Now, maybe we won't even have, quote unquote, the quantum level time thing. Who knows? I don't care. But we are going into a new era. There is not going to be the destruction of all of humanity again. It's just not going to happen. So what does that mean? I agree with you, Ross. Good point.
Well, that's what Rashi was talking about. That's why 499 was important to him. That
Right.
was the end of the old and the beginning of the Messianic age. That was what he was hinting at. That's what the Sadia Gaon was hinting at. But obviously they were 1,000 years short.
Or we also could draw a conclusion that we are already in this period of the conclusion of that period. I mean, it's just obvious. Even if we don't have Gog and Magog in the next year, it's immaterial. We're already been in it for some time, probably since 47.
well, think of it too, instead of being little chunks of time, as eras. The end of an era and the beginning of another era. So these cover distances in time. It's not like, okay, there's your cutoff, pop. Now we start, it's not like going from night to day, sun up, here it is dawn. Okay. It's not like a sudden shift. It's just a gradual transition into, if you will, because the way Daniel 8 reads, if I understand it right, what we're having to put up with since the time of Daniel is a slow, gradual progression of a mentality that sets in and permeates. It becomes a global sort of thing. And the individual that rises to the power at end seems to have mastered the art of deception through his speech. He'll say something and use a particular word to which you have a definition in your mind of that word, but the definition of the word to him is something completely different.
Well, let me change your strategy a second. I want to go back to verse number 14. Okay. In verse 14, he begins by saying, and he said to me until nightfall morning. What does nightfall morning look like? Now I want you to turn to the book of Zechariah, chapter 14. And I want you to see that same phrase, nightfall morning, from Zechariah's point of view. So we're on verse 7, chapter 14. I hope you're with me. It will be a unique day. It will be known as Hashem's day. Neither day nor night, but it will happen towards evening time that there will be light. Nighttime, morning.
Did you say there will be what?
It says towards evening time, there will be light.
Light.
Light, or. So this day is going to be very unique. And that's the phrase that Daniel is using. Now, Zechariah was written before Daniel. But again, Zechariah received his information in a vision also. So we're talking about vision experiences and the key or the link between the two. So this is going to be an unusual day in the sense that night will be day. And therefore, he calls it night day. That's what's going to happen. There's no transition from one to the other. It's it. Whatever it looks like, that will be it. And so there is a conclusion to this story. But we know that after this whole thing happens, then we're going to go through a period of judgment. We're going to go through a period of resurrections. We're going to go through the establishment of the new kingdom. We're going to go through the periods where people are going to repopulate this earth. All of that's going to happen after nighttime day. So that's a significant event, I think. But as we're looking at it, I'm trying to find the key words. That was one of those key words that I dug through, went to the lexicons, tried to figure out what it meant, went back to the book of Enoch. And that's where I got my understanding from. Nighttime day, Zechariah 14:7, a very unique day.
We also have Genesis 1 before earth was created. You have light was Tov, and then you have the separation between light and darkness. And it says God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and it was evening and it was morning one day.
Okay, now you've added to the problem.
Because this is a pinnacle. This is a point.
So he calls it one day.
Right.
What does he call the second day? The second day. Why doesn't he call the first day the first day?
Mm-hmm.
Why does he call it one day? Because if we go back to the very first word, in, bet, we're actually talking about what happened before this heaven and this earth were created.
Correct.
We're talking about time before.
Which we're talking about a new era being ushered in. This is the same hearkening to Genesis 1, which we should understand that just as Genesis 1 was the creation of time, space for us to dwell here, Noah and the flood was the second era ending into another era, right? And then we just go through, we can see the eras come. And then finally, there is going to be this one in which God says, okay, now I'm going to complete the work.
I'm not sure where in Pirkei Avot it is, but there were 974 generations before Bereshit.
Right.
974.
Right.
Meaning beginning and ending happened 974 times before we get to this situation.
So it's many beginning and endings, but we can be reassured that it's a restart.
Correct.
I mean, for people, this is the thing. I don't want people in this day to think that the end is coming. Oh my goodness, it's all over. I want you to start thinking, man, this is a great day for a restart. Now, we all think that we could use a reset. Sometimes I wish we had a button we could hit when we wake up in the morning. It doesn't happen that way. But
Hillary's got one.
Huh?
Hillary has one.
Oh, I'm sure she does.
You remember she did it with the Russians? She hit the target button. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
we should see the pattern that's emerging here, and the pattern is that this is the final redemption or another redemption. Hopefully we won't mess this one up like Lot did after Noah, right? But the whole point is it's a new time.
Cool.
Mary?
Okay, Mary Lou, you got something?
Well, I have a question, and that is, what's the significance of 974?
Oh, what's the significance? Okay. In Hebrew understanding, the first 974 generations did not accept Torah. That was the reason for their destruction. From the point of Adam, now you're getting me to teach you something in Genesis again that you probably already know, but I want you to go to Genesis chapter 2. And if you're in chapter 2 of Genesis, you're looking at the 3rd verse, okay? It begins by saying in the 3rd verse, God blessed the 7th day, he sanctified it because on it he abstained from all his work, which did what? God created to make. Created to make. Now, I don't know if you've got a Hebrew translation right there with your Bible, but if you do, you go over to the Hebrew side of that verse, and you'll find a very unusual line. Right in my art scroll, it's the very center word, and it's bet hey, which is small, not full size, with an asterisk above it. And then it's bet ram aleph mem. If you take those same letters and rearrange it, you have the word Abraham. Now that's the word to create and make. There was on the 1000th generation, 974 before the flood, on the 1000th generation, God created to make Abraham, in which all of this is now happening. This world was put here because of Abraham.
And God willing, tomorrow I'm going to expand on that.
Okay.
Because it's Noah comes here, Shem and Aver sets up the academy. They teach all the people that they know in the region, the nations, maybe the world. I don't know what their capabilities were. Lot learned from there. Eliezer asked for wisdom from Shem about Noah and the previous generation before. So it's pretty powerful. And then Lot, in his Noahic wisdom, decided to go to Sodom, or to go to help me here. I'm drawing a blank here, guys.
Sodom and Gomorrah?
Sodom and Gomorrah. Thank you. He goes there thinking, I'll be a good Noahide and I'll just make a teva here and protect myself. What he found out, he wasn't any influence on them at all. None. And one of the things that I'm going to teach, well, no, I'm not going to say that because you got to wait till tomorrow. But you're going to find out that there's.
Oh, you're going to do one of those. I already started that.
I know. I know.
Until next
I'm not
week.
letting you get away with it anymore. I'm doing it now. I just put a product placement and a teaser in at one time. But I'm just telling you, we have a mission right now in the end of days, and it's seen in this story of Lech Lecha. The nations do. So we're in a very beautiful time, guys. This is not the end of the world. It is the end of the world as we know it, thank God.
Yeah. A new beginning.
A new beginning. Baruch Hashem. And God willing, we'll all see it in our time.
Well, it's going to be a little rough terrain between the end of one and the beginning of another.
But... Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But I do, you know what, is something came to me, and I'll mention this tomorrow, but something came to me that has been on our mind for the longest time. It says that the Jewish people can choose whether redemption is sweet or bitter or chaotic. Remember that? And I've contemplated that a lot in the past few weeks. And I'm thinking, well, hold on. It's not just the Jewish people, but the righteous people, the nations that are living godly lives also have a major impact on whether this is going to be sweet or bitter. And then I thought, well, hold on. The earth is a big place. The universe is even a larger place. So turmoil doesn't happen every place all the time. Turmoil happens in certain places for certain reasons. And I do believe that we, as pious, righteous people and the Jews, should understand that generally you're going to be well taken care of by Hakadosh Baruch Hu. There's no betrayal from the master of the universe. So if you want it sweet, then start sweetening up yourselves. Become a better human being, a better person. Become full of light. Be a light emissary wherever you're at. And I really do believe that we play a huge role in this. And it's to me, it's exciting. I wake up every day really excited about what I'm going to find out. And then I have your class, Steve, which is brilliant.
Well, I don't know about brilliant, but it certainly does tease your brain.
Well, it does.
That's for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Hey, you're
Steve.
very welcome. Very
Very,
welcome.
very good. Can't wait to start getting this one posted up now.
Okay. I haven't seen it on YouTube, so I don't know whether they're doing well or not.
Well, I think we're running behind because we just have so much content up right now. I think we have like 15 or 20 videos waiting in queue.
Okay.
Because we still have Jeremiah that's in the queue. We have obviously the other classes that go on. So we'll get it up there, God willing.
Okay. Well, that's all right. God's in control.
Yes.
So anybody, any thoughts, anything that to add? I know I've run past my time and it's your fault, but anyway.
We'll dock your paycheck.
Okay. Okay. Well, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Lila.
How many